Welcome to Alabama Gristmill. It's good to have you back and listening. I'm your host, Mike Causey, with my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hi.
And say hello. I'm saying hello to you.
I'll say hello before you get to me.
Yes, exactly.
I'm jumping in here. I like this story today.
It's a good story. Today we're going to go over a couple of news items, not many, and then we're going to jump into a story about a little rocket that's got a big story.
Oh, yeah. It's a forgotten story, really. It's one of those that I love to get. When I find them once in a while hidden somewhere when I'm looking at something else. That's all. It's when you're researching these stories, that's what's so much fun. It's like finding a missing puzzle, and you just suddenly want to say, ah.
Yes, I mean, it was something that probably thousands of people drive by every day and they see a little rocket on the side of the road, but there's it's a big story behind it we'll go into. But again, as always, want to thank all our patrons out there. We really appreciate you supporting us and giving us the necessary help in getting this podcast out, as well as the AlabamaPioneers.com website and keeping it going. So we really appreciate those out there. So if you want to become a patron, you can always just go to our website, click on I want to be a patron, and it helps support our site here. So any type of donation is appreciated.
Keeps us going on those long days that when we're looking at the computer screen for a long, long time. That's the only thing bad.
And we just want to be able to share all the information we find and get it out there easily so people can enjoy it however they want to.
Yeah.
Be it a podcast, be it a website, be it a book, be it an ebook, all these different ways of doing it. So we just kind of getting it out there and seeing how people enjoy it and bring it to life.
Let us know what you think too. Give us we'd love to have some reviews about the podcast and what you like about it and what you don't like. We'll accept that too. We learn from it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Any type of feedback is great. And definitely if you know some people that are interested in a history in Alabama and would find this interesting, share the link to the podcast to them, and we'd appreciate that as well. Well, with all that business out of the way, let's go ahead and
need to get in the story. That's what most people listen for.
Yeah, get in the story. I mean, it's kind of like I said, it was about a little rocket that sits on the side of the road in Huntsville. People drive past it every day. It's got a big history behind it. We kind of wanted to go over that, especially with all the excitement in the space and nowadays with the SpaceX, Tesla rockets, and all the different groups that are launching and I guess now their missions to Mars. So, and kind of going back to where it all started. So I'll let you go ahead and get into the story now and tell us about the lonely little rocket.
Yeah, the lonely little rocket. It's just, and if you may drive by it in Huntsville on Airport Road and Memorial Parkway. It's at Huntsville's John Hunt Park. It's just a little guided missile, just a small one.
Yeah, it's just right on the corner out there, so it's right on a big intersection.
It's kind of separate from the Space Center stuff. Of course, I think they've got a duplicate at the Space Center, but this was the original. And
I will put the picture up you can see it on the website, and it's also attached to the podcast as well. So if you're looking with the podcast view, you can take a look at the actual rocket.
Right, and you can find out more about this whole story is on the website. So, and it's got a film of it too. The first showing of this little missile that you see there was in May 14, 1953, at the Redstone Arsenal that it was called back then. But let's go on back to the early beginning. We're going back to the 50s. Huntsville used to be just a little sleepy little town in North Alabama, not noted for all the space stuff until the 1950s. And it was suddenly, almost overnight, thrust into the space race. And it all started when Werner von Braun, a German aerospace engineer, who had been brought to America following World War II in sort of a clandestine event. And it's real interesting. They've done several things on PBS about how he came over. Operation called Operation Paperclip, and how he and a lot of scientists were brought over right after World War II. And they were brought first to Fort Bliss. He and about 1,000 other people and scientists and all came to Huntsville and started the Ordnance Guided Missile Center. It's called the OGMC. There's a whole history about Werner von Braun and this group of people, and it's very, very interesting. If you have time, be sure and look it up, and you can Google it and find out a lot about it. The little rocket was originally designated Hermes UGMC. It was the Army's new ballistic rocket. And later it was christened the Redstone after the Redstone Arsenal, which is the beginning of the space race in the Space Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And it was christened in about April 1952. And at the time, it was the first large liquid rocket developed using German V2 technology. So it kind of kicked off the space exploration in the United States. The Redstone was the last American major rocket system, which was based on alcohol as a fuel. They changed over later to kerosene and liquid oxygen in the mid-1950s. But that little old missile sitting on the corner was the beginning of what we have as our space program in the United States. During the 1950s, Wernher von Braun promoted the space flight. He was known to go around everywhere trying to get people more interested in it. He became a U.S. citizen himself in 1955, along with several other of the personnel from Germany. In early 1956, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency was formed under Major General John Madera. So it kind of changed names from the OGMC to the ABMA, as you can say. Then, of course, if anybody goes back in time and you've seen films all over again, in October 1957, Sputnik was launched by the Russians. They got kind of ahead of us at that time in space exploration. But the United States was not too far behind, and they were in the small town of Huntsville at the time. They were really working hard, and they launched the first American satellite right afterwards in January. I remember Sputnik going off when it first went into space. You got to go back in time to kind of think about that, because if you can imagine, you got to realize TV was new at this time. You know, we didn't watch all this on TV. We had to get on the radio.
Was this all on the radio?
Yeah, it was on the radio. Our whole family gathered around the radio, I remember, and when it was launched and we were listening, you know, they were plugging into the sounds, and I remember there was a beep, beep, beep going on, and I said, oh, I wonder if this, and they're always wondering, was it going to come back? You know, what's going to happen? It was an exciting time during those space days, because
was it scary?
It was kind of scary. You think
that
about
they had
it.
the technology to do that, and we didn't. And wasn't that a scary moment?
Yeah, it got us kind of worried, because we'd always been ahead of everybody in technology wise, and here Sputnik got up there first, so that really put a pressure on the United States scientists, especially those in Huntsville, Alabama, I imagine, trying to get ahead and get moving along with it. But we caught up. We caught up pretty quickly. And January 31st, 1958, the ABMA placed the first satellite, Explorer 1, into orbit. They used the Jupiter launch vehicle to get it up there. And it was the descendant of the Redstone, which was also a descendant of the Hermes missile that you see on that corner. Of course, this brought national attention to Redstone Arsenal. That's what it was called at the time. Huntsville was quickly named the Rocket City. So it was really bustling in the city of Huntsville. Can you imagine 1,000 people coming into your city? You're just a little small town, you know, not very large, you're good size, but nothing connected with space. And all these 1,000 people come moving in. A lot of them were German, probably didn't speak English well. And it just changed the whole city of Huntsville overnight.
Well, it's equivalent of like a Silicon Valley is now. It was the leading edge of technology.
It was.
At the time.
It was, and people forget that. You know, we often hear about Houston and the Space Center in Florida and all, but you don't often hear, I mean, you hear it, but not as much. But it was kind of the start of a lot of things that led on to that, especially that little missile. I mean, had it been for that little missile, we wouldn't be where we are today. And that was just that back then, they were just trying to get something off the ground, passed up into space. It was unbelievable that it could do that. You know, you look at the moon and think, how in the world can anybody ever get there? And now we can go there easily, fairly easily. I can't say easily, fairly easily. But well, anyway, going on along, and January 31st, they sent the first satellite up. And then in July of 1958, the center got changed again. President Eisenhower signed some legislation, and he established what we know today as NASA. And von Braun was formally transferred to that new agency, but he didn't really go anywhere. He stayed in Huntsville. It just was renamed. And basically, NASA's George C. Marshall Space Flight Center was built around von Braun's headquarters in Huntsville. If it hadn't been for his pushing all those years, we probably wouldn't have what we have today. But can you imagine that little center was the start of it all? Then, of course, we had President Kennedy's famous speech in 1961, and that's probably what everybody remembers most, where we were not feeling too good about Sputnik getting into space so early, so he created the emphasis and the ambition to land on the moon.
We shall send to the moon, 240,000 miles away, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
And we did achieve that goal in 1969.
And I remember even, I think Kennedy even came and visited Huntsville around that time as well. So there's even film footage of that on our site.
Yeah, there's some real historic, that's one thing that got me into this story is I found this historic vintage film of the time when it was dedicated and it's from the 1950s. You'll see some more, plenty of films within the story on the site, and you'll see the rocket, the little missile is sitting there. It's just kind of hard to think that, you go past these historic markers all the time, and sometimes it's hard to get to them and see them.
And this one actually is in pretty rough shape from what I hear. I think they're trying to figure out a way to get somebody to take care of that actual marker at that location.
Yeah, I think the historical marker designating what it was is not in good shape itself.
It's looking pretty rough, last I heard.
It's in the John Hunt Park. John Hunt himself was kind of forgotten a lot, his gravesite. We had a story about that not too long ago. We got to remember these little places like that. Don't let them go. This one is nationally related. It seems like some national recognition would come in on that one. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, and everything gets, right now is focused on which the wonderful that it should be is the Huntsville Space and Rocket Center. And a great place to visit. I mean, they've even got a full Saturn V, displayed there, which is a unique thing to see. And literally a Smithsonian-level quality museum. A lot of focus gets put that way, but the actual original location and the original start of all this was that one little rocket located just I guess, southeast of there.
Yeah, and thank goodness for the Huntsville Chamber of Commerce in 1956, who dedicated that. He sponsored and dedicated that historic marker for that little missile. Even though we got it in the Huntsville Space Center, you can see it there. It's nice to go to the one that was dedicated in 1956 during the really build-up stage of that. We have a picture on the site too, and maybe in the film as well, from 1953 of the rocket on a trailer. Those are important memories, the original ones, not just the duplicates a lot of times. We can always create duplicates, but it's nice to go when you have it original, because there's so many original things that disappear over time.
And the thing that I really to take from this is, these are things you pass by, you're still on the side of the road. I see those markers everywhere, and you kind of just, you don't think about it. You're like, oh, there's something there. But realizing how instrumental that was in the history of the world, really, and then the USA for sure.
Right.
And in the space program, it's where it all started, where everything we've got today, and it's now, from those little small moments of history.
What's neat, too, is to look at the pictures and look at the films from the old time, and before you go visit it, and it just really makes you feel closer to the people who started it all. I mean, here they didn't know much of anything, about compared to the technology we have today. With our cell phones and all this, that was big, big technology in 1953 when they were working with all this. So it was an amazing world that they lived in. And it kind of, look at the pictures and then go back and look at the actual object, and you see it's very simple compared to what we have today. I think it's a real good trip you to take with family and share with young people, because of the fact that technology has gone so far since those days. And you can explain what's going on and how much it has changed in our lifetime. It's a good little trip. So don't forget it. If you go to Huntsville and see that on the side of the road, take time to let somebody else know about it. And let's take care of these original
When you're going down there and visiting the shopping mall across the street, or grabbing a taco from Taco Bell, you can look across the street and remember there's the start of the space race.
Right. And we have it right here in Huntsville, Alabama. That's what's so amazing. We have a lot of firsts, but this is another first. It's very, very important. True
Alabama pioneer situation in Vernon Brown Braun. And, he was a pioneer in the space program. We wouldn't have it if it didn't start here.
Not to the extent that it has become now. And we forget that in time. Little places go on the wayside. Let's don't forget this one, because it's so valuable.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up with that one, with that nice little story about the lonely little rocket in Huntsville. If you've got any feedback, send us a message, info@alabamapioneers.com. And
if you know more about it and those days, those people from Huntsville, I know there are a lot of people listening that remember those days. Add to it in the comments on the story. Other people love to hear those stories themselves. This one I just happened to run across, and I just felt sad for that little missile. And I had to get the word out there. It was so small compared to the big fancy.
Yes, exactly. Compared to the new Space Center,
right.
Space and Rocket Center, it's just very simple.
It's very, very simple and very, very small. And, you think, it has so much history just in this little object here on the side of the road.
All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and feel free to, like and share the podcast if you can, if you'd like to. And we'll let Red Foley go ahead and play us on out with the Alabama Jubilee. Until next time.
And see you later.
Round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers. He let her go, oh honey.